Here are two facts about 2026, and both are true. First, in most of America right now, buying a home costs roughly $900 a month more than renting the same place. Renting is cheaper today. Second, the typical American homeowner has around 40 times the net worth of the typical renter. So which is it? Is renting the smart, cheaper move, or a trap that keeps you poor while owners get rich? The honest answer is, it depends, and the people yelling, always buy or renting is throwing money away, are both selling you something. Today we run the actual numbers: mortgage rates, rent, the 5% rule, and the net worth gap, so you can decide for yourself. Let's follow the money. I'm Don Blake, and this is USAFinance, where we hand you everything you need to get, keep, and grow your money with nothing but sourced facts and plain English. This is education, not advice. And today it's also a promise. No cheerleading. We are not on team rent or team buy. Both can be the right call, and both can be a costly mistake. Here's why it matters. For most families, housing is the single biggest line in the budget and the biggest financial decision they'll ever make. Getting it right is worth tens of thousands of dollars. Every number comes from the Federal Reserve, the National Association of Realtors, Freddie Mac, and the Census. If this helps you decide, subscribe. Let's get into it. First, the lay of the land in 2026. The national median home price sits near $420,000. The 30-year fixed mortgage rate has been hovering around 6.5% to nearly 7%. And the median rent on a typical two-bedroom is around $1,850 a month. Put those together and, nationally, the monthly cost of buying a typical home runs roughly $900 more than renting one, once you add mortgage, taxes, insurance, and upkeep. In fact, by recent counts, only a small fraction of major U.S. cities are actually cheaper to buy than to rent right now. On a pure monthly basis, renting usually wins today, but monthly cost is only half the story. Here's where almost everyone goes wrong. The debate gets framed as renting is throwing money away versus a mortgage builds equity, so buying always wins. Both slogans are too simple. The truth is that renting and buying both have costs you never get back. Economists call them unrecoverable costs, money spent purely to have a roof over your head, with nothing to show for it later. When you rent, your unrecoverable cost is obvious. It's your rent. When you buy, it's less obvious, but it's real. And it is not your whole mortgage payment. Once you see housing through that lens, unrecoverable cost versus unrecoverable cost, the decision gets a lot clearer. Let's break down each side. Start with renting, because it's the simpler one. When you rent, 100% of your rent is unrecoverable. You pay it, you get a place to live, and at the end of the month it's gone. You build no equity. That's the case against renting in a nutshell, and it's real. But notice the flip side. Rent is all you pay. No property tax, no maintenance bill, no $10,000 roof, no closing costs, no realtor commission when you leave. And renting buys you something owners don't have: flexibility. You can move for a job, a relationship, or a better city in 30 days without selling anything. For some people, in some seasons of life, that flexibility is worth a lot. Now buying, and here's the myth buster. When you make a mortgage payment, only part of it builds equity. The rest is unrecoverable, just like rent. Your unrecoverable costs as an owner are the mortgage interest, the property taxes, the homeowner's insurance, and the maintenance. Add the money you spent on closing costs to get in and the commission you'll pay to get out. None of that comes back. What does come back is the principal, the slice of each payment that pays down your loan balance. That part is real savings. So the fair fight isn't rent versus your whole mortgage payment. It's your rent versus an owner's true unrecoverable costs. And there's a clean rule of thumb for estimating those. It's called the 5% rule, and financial planners use it to compare renting and buying on equal footing. The idea: a homeowner's yearly unrecoverable costs tend to add up to about 5% of the home's value. It breaks into three, roughly 1 to 3% pieces. Property taxes, call it 1% of the home's value a year. Maintenance, another 1% a year. Homes need roofs, furnaces, and repairs. And the cost of the money tied up in the home, roughly 3%. Add them up and you get about 5% of the home's price every year in costs you never get back, separate from the equity you're building. So here's how you actually use it. Take that $420,000 median home. 5% of it is $21,000 a year in unrecoverable ownership costs. Divide by 12, and that's about $1,750 a month. Gone, just like rent. Now compare that to renting a similar place at around $1,850 a month. On that basis, the two are surprisingly close, roughly a wash. Here's the punchline of the 5% rule. If you can rent a comparable home for less than 5% of its purchase price per year, renting and investing the difference may come out ahead. If renting costs more than that, buying starts to look better. It won't make the decision for you, but it cuts through the slogans. Let's kill the biggest myth head on. Renting is throwing money away. It's a great line. It's also only half true, because a huge chunk of an early mortgage payment is thrown away too. That thrown away part is the interest. In the early years of a 30-year loan, most of your monthly payment goes to the bank as interest, not to your own equity. So a first-year buyer and a renter are both throwing money away. The renter on rent, the owner on interest, taxes, and upkeep. The owner just gets a small sliver of forced savings on top. That sliver matters over time, but in year one, the equity you're building is a lot smaller than the slogan suggests. Here's the mechanic behind that, and it surprises people. It's called amortization, the schedule of how your loan gets paid off. On a typical 30-year mortgage at today's rates, in the first few years, roughly 70 to 80% of each payment goes to interest, and only 20 to 30% actually reduces what you owe. The equity builds slowly at the start and speeds up later. That's why buying and quickly selling is often a money loser. You've paid mostly interest plus closing costs on both ends and built almost no equity. The wealth-building power of a mortgage is real, but it's a slow machine. It rewards people who stay put for years, not people who move every couple of years. Let's go back to that monthly gap, because it's the part renters underestimate and buyers forget. Nationally, buying a typical home right now costs around $900 a month more than renting a comparable one. That's real cash every month out of your budget. Now here's the question that decides everything. What does the renter do with that $900? If they spend it, the owner almost certainly comes out ahead over time. Forced savings beats no savings. If the renter invests it month after month, the math gets much closer and can even favor renting. That single choice, invest the difference or spend it, is the hinge the whole rent versus buy decision turns on. Want one number to sanity check your own city? Use the price to rent ratio. Take the price of a typical home in your area and divide it by the annual rent for a similar place. The rule of thumb, a ratio under 15 generally favors buying. Between 15 and 20 is a gray zone. It depends on your plans, and over 20 tends to favor renting. An example, a $420,000 home and a similar rental at $1,850 a month. That's about $22,000 a year. $420,000 divided by $22,000 is a ratio near 19. That's the gray zone, leaning toward renting, which matches what we're seeing nationally. Coastal cities run way higher. Some Midwest markets sit comfortably below 15. Now the number that stops renters cold. According to the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances, the typical homeowner has a net worth around $430,000. The typical renter, around $10,000. That's a gap of roughly 40 to 1. Read it fast, and it sounds like buying a house automatically makes you 40 times richer. It does not. That's the single most misread statistic in personal finance. It's a correlation, not a magic wand. And understanding why the gap exists is the whole ballgame. Because if you copy the reasons owners build wealth, you can build it as a renter too. And if you buy a house but ignore them, you can still end up broke. Let's unpack it. So why do homeowners have so much more wealth? 4 honest reasons. 1. Forced savings. A mortgage makes you set aside principal every month whether you feel like it or not. 2. Leverage. You control a $400,000 asset with a much smaller down payment, so appreciation is amplified. 3. A fixed payment. Rents tend to rise for decades, a fixed mortgage payment doesn't. 4. Time. Owners on average are older and have simply been saving longer. Notice what's not on that list. Any guarantee that a house is a better investment than stocks. The gap is mostly about behavior and leverage, not magic in the walls. Which raises the obvious question for renters. If the owner's edge is really forced savings and leverage, can a disciplined renter close the gap? Honestly, yes, a good chunk of it. Remember that roughly $900 monthly difference, plus the down payment a renter never tied up in a house. Invest all of that steadily in a diversified index fund and let it compound for a decade or two, and a renter can build serious wealth of their own. The catch is right there in the word disciplined. Most people don't invest the difference, they spend it. That's the real reason owners pull ahead. The house isn't smarter than the renter. It just automatically saves for them. So the honest takeaway, buying forces the good behavior. Renting requires it. Here's the last big concept, the break-even point. Buying a home comes with heavy one-time costs, roughly 2 to 5% of the price to buy and another 5 to 6% in commissions and fees to sell. Those costs mean it takes time for buying to pull ahead of renting. Depending on your market and assumptions, that break-even can land anywhere from a few years to well over a decade. The classic rule of thumb: if you're confident you'll stay put for at least 5 years, buying has time to work. If there's a real chance you'll move sooner, renting is often the safer financial bet. Time in the home, more than anything else, is what turns buying into a win. Let's make it concrete. When does renting tend to win? When you might move within a few years for a job, school, or life. When you're in a high-cost city with a price-to-rent ratio above 20, where owning is wildly expensive, when you'd have to stretch dangerously to afford the down payment and monthly cost, and when you'll actually invest the money you save. Renting also quietly protects you from a big surprise repair, a special assessment, or being trapped in a house you can't sell in a downturn. Flexibility has real financial value. Renting is not failing. For millions of people, in the right city and season of life, it's simply the smarter math. There's no shame in it. Now the flip side. When does buying tend to win? When you'll stay put for at least 5 years so the machine has time to work. When your local price-to-rent ratio is on the lower side. When your income and job are stable enough to handle a repair or a rough patch. And when you know yourself well enough to admit you would not invest the difference as a renter. For that last group, and it's a big group, the forced savings of a mortgage is genuinely life-changing. It quietly builds wealth on autopilot. Buying also locks in your monthly housing cost against decades of rising rents. If you value stability and roots, that peace of mind is worth real money too. Before we wrap, the costs first-time buyers almost always underestimate because they wreck the math. Closing costs to buy, roughly 2 to 5% of the price. Selling costs later, another 5 to 6% in commissions and fees. Property taxes, around 1% of the home's value every year and rising. Maintenance, budget another 1% a year. The roof, the furnace, the water heater will fail eventually. Then there's insurance. And if you're in a condo or a managed community, HOA fees that can climb. None of these build equity. They're the ownership version of unrecoverable costs, and leaving them out of your comparison is the fastest way to talk yourself into a house you can't actually afford. So let's turn this into a plan. First, the do's, general principles, not personalized advice. Do compare your rent to an owner's true unrecoverable costs using the 5% rule, not to the whole mortgage payment. Do check your city's price-to-rent ratio before you decide. Do be brutally honest about how long you'll stay. Under 5 years leans toward renting. And do decide in advance that if you rent, you will actually invest the monthly difference. Then automate it so it happens whether you feel like it or not. That last habit is the one that lets a renter build wealth like an owner. Automation beats willpower every single time. Now the don'ts, where good, careful people go wrong. Don't buy just because someone told you renting is throwing money away. So is mortgage interest in the early years. Don't stretch to the edge of your budget for a down payment, leaving nothing for the roof that will eventually leak. Don't buy a home you might need to sell in 2 or 3 years. The transaction costs alone can erase your equity. And don't assume a house always beats the stock market. Over long stretches, broad index funds have often done just as well or better. Finally, don't let anyone rush you. This is a 5-figure plus decision. It deserves a calculator, not a slogan. Let's recap by the numbers. In 2026, buying a typical home costs around $900 a month more than renting. A median home is near $420,000. Mortgages run about 6.5% to 7%, and rent averages near $1,850. The 5% rule says owning costs roughly 5% of a home's value a year in unrecoverable costs. The price-to-rent ratio guides you. Under 15 liens buy, over 20 liens rent. And that 40-to-1 net worth gap, it's mostly forced savings, leverage, and time. Habits a disciplined renter can copy. Buying forces good behavior. Renting requires it. Either can win. The math and your own plans decide. So here's the real takeaway. There is no universal right answer to rent versus buy. There's only the right answer for your city, your timeline, and your discipline. Run your own numbers and ignore anyone who hands you a slogan instead of a calculator. At USAFinance, that's the whole mission. Hand you what you need to get, keep, and grow your money. Sourced in plain English, never advice. If this helped you think clearly, subscribe. It's free, and it's how we keep going. And next time, we tackle the account almost every worker has and almost nobody understands. Your 401k, how the match, the fees, and the tax break really work. I'm Don Blake. Make your money work. We'll see you next time.